Thank you for that generous welcome. I want to dedicate this talk today to Sister Diane, whom I love. Since I first saw Sister Diane in late February smiling at me down the hall of Erskine, wooing me in gentle ways to consider speaking as part of this series, I've been working toward a coherent speech, something well-arranged and artistic. And I fear my talk may reflect my struggle instead to come to make things as coherent as I want them to be with the relationship of these complex topics. I fear it may be more like this, where things have grown and grown and grown, but I'm going to do my best today. Today, I will begin by identifying the importance of truth here at ODU, and then I will share some of the current realities around truth in our world. And finally, I will share possible impacts on our students as students from living in what we call a post-truth society. These were some of the topics that I considered. By April, I had a topic, and by May, I had changed to a different topic, and by June, such the overgrowth, but I think I've got it today. I said at 2:50 to Sister Hohenbrink, I'm ready. Okay, so today I'll begin with taking you down to the center of our beautiful campus and looking at Erskine Hall, where we see the motto for Ohio Dominican University, to contemplate truth and to share with others the fruits of that contemplation. This relates to the motto of the Dominican order, Veritas. The founders of our university, the Sisters of St. Mary's of the Spring, were motivated by, quote, the conviction that truth is one, that truths in the various academic disciplines cannot be contradictory, and that truth leads to the God who said, I am the truth. The word truth is in our learning outcomes, and the closing of our mission statement expresses the desired goal for our students. They, our students, in turn, will become ethical, effective leaders grounded in the pursuit of truth, justice, and peace. That is our goal for you students, and teaching truth and helping you engage with truth is our aim at Ohio Dominican. Against the backdrop of these ideas is the larger context of our world and its changing, conflicting ideas around truth. For our traditional age students, 18 to 22 years old, their adolescence has been filled with headlines about fake news, alternate facts, the legitimacy of vaccinations and the concern of anti-vaxxers, the use and misuse of ChatGPT and AI, the prominence of the phrase my truth instead of my opinion and my experience, with the idea that truth is mainly about feelings and emotions, and with the proposal that truth is what is right for us. They've witnessed emotional tirades by a president and members of Congress, the canceling of others, the rise of influencers, and manipulation and alteration of images and facts to misrepresent reality. These words, images, ideas fill their screens, shape their understanding of civic engagement, and how they're going to decide what is true during their early and late adolescence. Unlike older generations like mine, they do not have decades beyond this experience as context for these recent phenomena. Social media layers in these conversations on the spreading of false news, distrust in science, a denial of truth, conspiracy theories, political polarization rapidly and frequently, and as they look at their phones, these come across as they're looking for playlists, memes, Netflix binges, TikTok videos, serious mental health issues, and more. Quickly, that individual student will see a news headline about fake news on the screen as she lowers her eyes to find her favorite song for her workout. But concerns about truth are worldwide. Post-truth was selected as the word of the year in 2016 by Oxford Dictionaries, and the usage of the word in 2016 increased by 2,000%. Although we in the United States may situate the rise of the post-truth situation with our 2016 presidential election, articles written by many around the world contextualize it as something prevalent in many countries. I think this is one of the challenges for our students. in dealing with the idea of post-truth. As one of our international students said to me this week when we discussed the opportunities he has here versus the value of growing up in his home country, he characterized American children and teens, and I would say adults, as being more immature in their understanding of other countries. I know this is true for me. We tend to see things nationally first instead of internationally. And for most of our students then, post-truth concerns have been nationalized and sometimes focused on a person or on a few important topics, to the detriment of seeing it as much more pervasive than the support of a president or the rejection of a vaccine. Researchers Barzilai and Chin laid out 5 interconnected trends characterizing this situation of misinformation. 1, the prevalence and influence of misinformation and disinformation. And if you would, just turn to your neighbor for an example for a second and try to define the difference between misinformation and disinformation. Just turn to your neighbor. Okay, does someone want to share the definition of misinformation? What is misinformation? This is like my class. You all talk really loudly, then I ask you to share with me and you don't want to share. What do you think misinformation is? You can even read it off your phone if you looked it up. Yes?
We thought it was incorrect information, but without a malicious intent.
Right. Right, so I thought the rain was coming at 3, I was misinformed. Okay? Disinformation then is exactly what you were implying. It's with the intent to deceive. Okay, I'm going to use those 2 terms today. This time is also characterized by an increasing rejection of well-established claims. The third is placing personal beliefs and experiences above facts and evidence. 4th is the declining trust in institutional providers of information, such as journalism and science. And 5th is an increasing fragmentation and polarization of information and consumption. So, for the purpose of this speech, I'm going to use the word post-truth to try and get at this challenge that we're facing. But I have some concerns with this word, and it's a concern I found often when I was reading, and I think it's the reason people put it in quotes, post-truth. It's because we don't want it to be assumed that we're done with truth, so we're now on to something other than truth. Instead, it's this idea that truth is being jettisoned for something else. I actually do believe that people care about truth. I believe they rely on truth on a daily basis, but we may not know how to get at what is true or how to address what it means for some things to be true and some things to be false. We're not comfortable with defining truth. We're also seeing a rise in feeling something is true or right instead of knowing or believing something to be true or right. This distinction makes it hard to know how to engage with other people. As N.T. Wright said, today we may characterize our position on something as if what we believe is mostly how we feel about it. When someone says, I feel that's wrong, it sounds less confrontational that way than if I were to say, I think that's wrong. But then we are left with someone's feelings, and we don't feel comfortable confronting someone's feelings. You have the right to your feelings. However, it's hard to say your feelings are based on shoddy evidence. We can't really say that, so the conversation just is at a standstill. In their book, Imagine Youth Futures, University Students in Post-Truth Times, Black and Walsh quote author Day Ancona, who characterizes well what is very concerning about our post-truth society. Quote, what is new is not mendacity, lying, But the public's response to it, this growing primacy of emotional resonance over facts and evidence, the replacement of verification with social media algorithms that tell us what we want to hear. Truth is losing its value as society's reserve currency, and legitimate skepticism is yielding place to pernicious relativism. I think legitimate skepticism over pernicious relativism. I would suggest, too, that the validation of extreme emotional responses over reason and civil discourse leave us befuddled and feeling unsafe. And so we don't want to talk about it. But what is interesting is if you were to look on dictionary.com right now and just type in the word truth, this is what you would hear. You would hear, 1, the true or actual state of a matter. 2, conformity with fact or reality. This harkens back to Dr. Gierspeck's presentation 2 weeks ago. And a source as general as Britannica.com tells us, truth is the aim of belief. Falsity is a fault. People need the truth about the world in order to thrive. Truth is important. Believing what is not true is apt to spoil people's plans and maybe even cost them their lives. These clear definitions of truth seem almost out of place in our world, don't they? As if they're disjointed from our talk in what has been called a post-truth society. But it's not as if we don't live and work as if this is the definition of truth. When we get on Google's Maps and it says turn right, we think we're supposed to turn right. When we are seeking quality relationships, we care about whether or not someone is telling us the truth. And in requiring students to not plagiarize, because we're telling them it's untruthful to claim another person's work as your own. We're going back to that simple definition. Berzalai and Chen explain the importance of valuing truth as society. True belief has an instrumental, practical value for individual and social well-being. Engineers rely on accurate information to plan robust buildings. I don't understand that word robust there. I just think they mean that one that has integrity. And people need accurate information about contagious diseases so they can feel safe and avoid quack remedies. Accurate facts and data are necessary for rational societal decision-making and democratic deliberation and debate. We know we need truth in order to survive and thrive personally and as a country. We cannot eschew it because of conflicts. My second concern, in addition to my concern with using that word post-truth, is the idea that the impacts are unique to only college students or that they are a sign of a weakness in a college student. I do not believe either of those things to be true at all. Instead, I think the situation is especially pernicious when young adults are devoting several years to intense learning at a time that post-truth is so heavily influencing our world. So how are today's college students being impacted by a world where truth is being attacked? The first impact I see is the use of social media can create a silo where students are bombarded by misinformation and lies, as well as unexamined reinforcement of their own views. Rebecca Nee studies journalism and media studies. In her article, Youth Quakes in a Post-Truth Era, she's studying how social networks are being used and perceived by students in the post-truth era. Although there was the hope that social networks would increase participation in our democracy, they have found that it's being used instead to, quote, serve specific interest, spread propaganda, and misinformation. She explained, in addition to the rise of fake news and divisive content online, researchers have found that algorithms used by social media companies and people's tendencies to stay within their own social groups have created this echo chamber where you're hearing back the very things that you want to hear. And that actually hinders having an informed society. So instead of it increasing civic engagement by average citizens, social media is led by negative, non-professional actors who troll, do cyberbullying, and spearhead misinformation and hate campaigns. In addition to that misinformation, We, as users of social media, tend to limit what news we will accept. If users' political, according to Nee again, if users' political opinions were similar to the person who posted it, they are more likely to find that post believable. This finding aligns with the bandwagon research done prior to the digital age, that we will get on the bandwagon of those with whom we agree. Researchers refer to this condition as silos. We get into silos. A second concern and an impact is the generation and propagation of inaccurate information in the news, what we would call fake news. And it creates this vulnerability to accept inaccurate information and leads us as individuals to question all news and all information. My daughter asked me what I was talking about, and I explained it, and she said, "That happens to me too, Mama. I can't sometimes know what's true." But we know college students are actually accessing news regularly. According to an article in 2022, most college students read or listen to the news from mobile platforms and digital devices. And several articles suggest a great diversity of news sources, podcasts, YouTube, videos, news apps. But one study of 5,000 college students found that in the last week of the study, 71% had received news from Facebook. Now think for just a moment about how you know you are curating what you're hearing and seeing on Facebook. 51% got their news from Instagram, 54% from YouTube, and 55% Snapchat. As a whole, studies confirm that young people do pay attention to the news, but not necessarily traditional news sources. In addition to that, students lack confidence in distinguishing the veracity of the news. I think a lot of us do. In a mixed method study conducted and these years I think are important, 2017, 2018, and then published in 2019, it was composed of a researcher at Harvard studying 5,000 students over 11 colleges with an open-ended survey of 1,200 of them and 37 follow-up phone interviews. Allison Head, the scholar, found that students are distrustful of news because fake news has them distrusting the credibility of any news. Researchers found nearly half of them lacked confidence in distinguishing real news from fake news, and only 14% felt very confident in their ability to detect fake news. As one student in the study put it, it's really hard to know what's real in today's society. There's a lot of news sources, and it's difficult to trust any of them. In a Gallup poll, trust in news was at an all-time low in 2016 and at the second lowest in 2021. In addition, we do not seem hardwired to be able to distinguish the truth from a lie. We're not machines that automatically can distinguish that. Research shows that we're slightly biased toward believing people are telling the truth. Authors of a study entitled Lies, Damn Lies, and Expectations, How Base Rates Inform Lie-Truth Judgments, Street and Richardson explain how this bias toward believing truth actually helps people form accurate judgments. It makes sense because the researchers assert mostly people are telling us the truth. Overall, it's not sure why we defer to the truth, but we do defer to the truth more times than not. Interestingly, research on that truth bias demonstrates that we believe repeated information, even when it comes from a dubious source. We might start to discredit it, but it doesn't remove that truth effect because our memory cannot remember things perfectly, so we can't remember if it's true or not. In fact, most people detect dishonesty at a rate barely better than chance due to this truth bias. An article discussing the impact on believing images says that pictures enhance the idea of truth and it makes it more believable. But the challenge is we can learn to distrust our eyes in this day and age of seeing images, but it takes a lot of training, according to the research. So remember, most of our students are getting their news on a digital device, not hearing it over the radio or a traditional newspaper where they're more likely to have images attached, which increase the believability of something. At the same time, the news is getting a little bit worse here, that we're not hardwired to know truth from error. We do seem to be more likely to believe something if it's repeated. This actually came from a 1977 study when these researchers, Hasher, Goldstein, and Toppin, were the first to prove empirically that true and false statements from different domains, if repeated, are more believable. So what they did is participants rated the truth of each statement on a scale from 1, meaning it was false, to 7, true, or definitely true. 2 weeks later, those same participants were again asked to provide their truth ratings. This time, the statements consisted of new statements as well as repeated, and the effect was a clear truth effect. The higher ratings were for repeated statements. The truth effect has been replicated, so they know that this is happening. Now imagine how many social media sites are being we're gleaning from, and so how many times we're hearing the information. Repetition can cause things to be more believable, even though they're not true, and it can cause people to believe things that are actually the opposite of what was said. Merely seeing a concept increases later belief in that detailed claim about the topic. So they see the topic, and just having seen it, they then can go on to actually believe something that's not true. So for example, if they read a statement like, I didn't make this up, it was in the article, crocodiles sleep with their eyes open. It leads people later to believe the opposite if they see it. Oh, I remember. They believe a direct contradiction. Oh, crocodiles sleep with their eyes closed. It seems more truthful only because it's repeated, like the crocodiles and sleeping gets repeated, and they don't remember if it's with your eyes open or your eyes closed. It's just because it's repeated. People forget the details of the initial claim, instead basing their judgments on how easy it is to process that key concept. So imagine seeing a headline that says, vaccines work 90% of the time, and then another one that says, vaccines don't work 90% of the time. In fact, they found that as they tried to contradict information, it actually was being used to verify the information as a headline. They were processing it as a repeated concept. So you consider that information in light of the prevalence of social media. We know that they're inundated. We're all inundated with information, and it layers on the believability of something. In fact, it makes people vulnerable to accepting false claims, because false claims are more likely to be promulgated, actually, than the true claims by those who are creating fake news. To summarize this point, college students do not feel prepared to distinguish true from false claims in a time of fake news and altered images. All of us are more likely to believe things are true, though, when we see them, especially if they're repeated, and trying to counter fake news can exacerbate what is believed, exacerbate the belief in it. At the same time, many college students are highly connected to TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and other apps. I have Facebook. I have Instagram, but differing sources said college students are on social media 1 to 5 hours a day. There are 4 impacts. The third impact is that living in a post-truth society can create an unsettling disconnect between personal beliefs and curriculum for college students. Fear of being ostracized or canceled can cause them to not be able to hear multiple sides of an issue. Individuals who make up all sides of our communities are in our classrooms. And what they may be hearing at home or in their communities or in their social media silo may be a steady stream of information that's different than what is being taught in the classroom. Students of all backgrounds and beliefs attend universities. We know beliefs, which influence what we accept as knowledge, vary. When we speak of one political party in a classroom, students in the classroom may be of the other political party. We know this, and it's always been like this. However, the beliefs today are now set apart so that they're not only different, but that there is such strong opposition to differing ideas. I think the nature of the polarization, too, is that both sides want to claim the high ground. They are the ones that are moral. They are the ones who have truth. They are the ones working for democracy and the good of the people, such that if you don't associate with them, if you're from the other, you're not doing anything right. It's like a complete rejection. Few of us regularly discuss politic ideas with those whose views differ from our own. And I wrote that, but then are there any of you who say, I really do engage a lot with people whose views differ from my own? Okay? A few, I was going to say Ron does, because, yes, of course you do, my friend. But yes, but not most of us, I would say. Most of us probably don't. We don't want to create a conflict or make someone feel uncomfortable, so we stay away from that kind of conversation. But the classroom is a space where these topics arise, and students will probably have to engage with information or ideas or opinions they usually avoid discussing outside their silos. An interesting example of this impact on a student was shared by Dr. Albert Zeyer. He's a science educator, physician, and mathematical physicist in Switzerland. He tells the story of what he calls her a clever young lady who he gives the name Judith. She was brilliant at languages, she was brilliant in philosophy, but she was constantly failing in science. And he was convinced she could succeed if she would want to succeed in science. So once after a physics class, he took her aside and he asked her why she was resisting participation in the science class. She surprised him by answering, I hate natural sciences because they always pretend to be in charge of the whole truth. Zeyer said, after this conversation, I came to have a closer look at my students and realized that many of them had that same problem with the natural sciences. They suspected that natural sciences wanted to claim the whole truth, and this was a serious obstacle for them to become involved. He goes on to say, during my conversation with her, she told me more about her problems with natural sciences. Her mother turned out to be a practicing therapist in homeopathic medicine and acupuncture. And her family held strong, holistic views, including a decisive rejection of abortion in early pregnancy, a cultural constellation not unusual in our country. He's from Switzerland. So he said the effect of science class on Judith became clear to him. The physics teacher mocked astrology. In biology, she learned there's no such thing as a nerve system in embryo of 10 weeks, and therefore abortion does not really pose a problem to ethics. And in chemistry, the teacher calculated the number of medicine molecules left in a homeopathic dilution, and named it as 0. In science class, I feel dumb, like a complete fool, Judith explained to me. The author came to believe that Judith's problem was not with studying science, it was scientism, that idea that only science can answer all questions. I believe a concern for our students in post-truth society may be trying to learn new and different ideas when the ideas differ from those of people within their communities or social media communities, and the differences can seem to require a move away from their own community and those who are valuable to them in order to learn something that they also could value as true. What's interesting is this story with Judith was recorded in 2009, but I think it represents what can be an impact for many students today. As one author who studied 3 high school social studies teachers during the year or so after the election of Donald Trump said, he observed these students and the teacher's response, and he said, quote, students carry emotionally fueled personal beliefs into their classroom. These collections of knowledge are precious to them, they're constitutive. And in this sense, the process of learning new knowledge is painful. It necessitates breaking down and rebuilding old and new knowledge. It's a difficult process, one that is resisted. And on some campuses, though I don't really think this is true of Ohio Dominican, ideas are shut down. In his article, Academic Freedom and the Fallacy of Post-Truth, Nurin David, who is from South Africa, asserts, when we take stock of academic freedom in spaces of higher ed, we see growing patterns of shutting down and closing off rather than opening up. Academics are speakers who are deemed as holding controversial, harmful views are routinely prevented from speaking in university camp spaces. At times, speakers are heckled and insulted while attempting to speak, often descending into disturbing displays of violence and humiliation. Other times, their initial invitations are rescinded, disinvitation, before they even reach the podium. Both of these acts, that is, heckling and disinvitation, suggest not only an intolerance of that which is disagreeable, but an abandonment of speech and freedom. I'd read another article where they had polled over 1,500 students, and 1 in 5 of those students believed that it was okay to use violence to shut someone down when they didn't want to hear what they had to say. I would hypothesize that situations such as the ones above can create significant cognitive dissonance. I didn't read a lot about this, but I can't imagine that it doesn't create cognitive dissonance for students. We know that schooling has an effect of creating some cognitive dissonance. That's part of maturing and growing and understanding other people's ideas. I remember as a high school student watching a video. It actually probably was a video, I don't remember, but a video of a marching in of the KKK in Skokie, Illinois, which was a town that had a lot of Holocaust survivors in it. And I was appalled, and I was so angry about that happening. And at the same time, people were talking about, don't we think people should have freedom of speech? And I thought, yes, I do believe in freedom of speech, but I don't want it there, and I don't like it there. I had this cognitive dissonance. I can also remember in my senior English class, the first time I was introduced to the concept of existentialism. I was so shaken by that idea that I thought, I have to go home right now. I cannot go to zoology. I need to think about this. It was making my equilibrium was getting off. That's part of growing and learning. New ideas are unsettling. And in a post-truth society where experts are questioned and traditional sources vilified, it may be challenging for students to know how to process this information they're learning and hearing when it's rejected by the others in their silos. The fourth impact is that a positive learning response in a post-truth reality requires more depth of thinking for students at a time when this type of thinking is not being modeled or valued in our society because people are choosing to align themselves with what polarizes them. To respond to post-truth society's impact, students need depths of learning that addresses the issue that creates their foundational ideas about politics, about science, about their own value and self-worth, and about their role in our world. They need to think deeply about truth. I think the situation of not trusting experts has been exacerbated by the pandemic. A researcher at Yale, Dan Cahan, suggested that our understanding of basic facts about politicized science issues depends on whether or not we trust the person conveying them. And in the decision to trust a source, objective expertise appears to matter less than the determination that this person shares our belief, our assumptions, our suspicions, that they are, in a sense, a member of our tribe. Cahan actually says something that is that scientific cherry picking is not the exclusive domain of people that live in rural areas or non-college educated or the religious. He says that he found that highly educated people with advanced reasoning skills were the most adept at filtering out evidence that contradicted their cultural presuppositions. Again, this idea that we're becoming polarized and choosing that over making sure that we're examining our ideas and our sources. So let's return to this idea that students, and many in general, have trouble distinguishing the truth of news. One idea for responding to this concern of fake news, and indeed responding to the post-truth condition, is the idea that we will double down on teaching people how to know what sources are right. And that is true. It is important that students can distinguish accurate information. It's a basis for understanding. But seeking truth is more than just about checking facts. Seeking truth is checking for accuracy, but it includes employing reason to consider our epistemologies. what it is that it's when you're able to distinguish a justified belief from an opinion, because you think about how you know something. How do we know something? That's an epistemology. If you want to know more, you can talk to Dr. Masick afterwards. He can tell you more about, or Dr. Shearspeck or Dr. Doherty, many others here as well. In their article, Disagreeing About How to Know, the Instructional Value of Exploration and Knowing, the authors asserted that some post-truth problems can arise from fundamental disagreements about what kinds of knowledge are valuable, which sources are reliable, what the standards and procedures for achieving knowledge should be. In these cases, it's not simply that some people are misinformed or biased about how to evaluate their sources. Rather, they have different epistemic commitments regarding which sources are trustworthy, about what kind of evidence is reliable, and about the proper standards and methodologies for deciding what is true. This is according to Chin, Barzali, and Duncan. These researchers call this deep epistemic disagreement. And so they give a really good example. They say, imagine that we're talking about vaccinations. Those who support the scientific evidence believe that the science of vaccinations is a reliable process, the importance of large sample size on creating good evidence, and they think that's the best way to come to right information. While those who do not support the vaccines are focused on things like avoiding air. Is there any possible risk from the vaccination? What are the long-term effects of the vaccination? Would the vaccine harm a baby? Are we sure? Do we have the data on this? Or are we sure that the protocols actually prevent the spread of the condition? These deep epistemic disagreements like these make it hard to resolve basic disagreements because disagreeing parties do not accept each other's sources and evidence. One of the challenges, and this is my conclusion, one of the challenges for college students is never attending to these deep epistemic disagreements, never knowing how to evaluate if something is right or wrong, unless we simply check for the accuracy of the source. Post-truth is about accurate information, but it's also about seeking to understand how and why beliefs get formed and examining why we believe what we do believe. I think this examination of belief has been a part of a college experience for many of us, if not most all college students to some degree. But that search is helped along as we discuss ideas, we read challenging texts, we are nurtured in our critical thinking. It grows within a culture that believes in truth, that believes in right and wrong, that values ideas, and yes, that values disagreements for the purpose of finding truth. I read several articles offering ways to address the challenges of post-truth impact on our students, but I'm nearly out of time. So I'm going to kind of conclude with what I gleaned most from. And one is we must attend to disinformation and misinformation. But secondly, we must attend to epistemologies, how we know and what is true. So I think my speech sounds negative, and I don't like to be negative. I'm a person of hope, but I also wanted to share the best information I could with you. But I don't want to be a Pollyanna who does not see the direness of these spread of lies. I'm sobered by Hannah Arendt's words. The result of a consistent, of a consistent and total substitution of lies for factual truth is not that the lie will now be accepted as truth, and truth will be defamed as lie, but the sense by which we take our bearings in the real world in the category of truth versus falsehood is among the mental means to this end, is being destroyed. We can't get our bearings in the world. And her final quote there, if everybody always lies to you, the consequence is not that you believe the lies, but rather that nobody believes anything any longer. I would say, and I say this wholeheartedly, I believe that there are good things happening at ODU along these lines. One, students, you are given a liberal arts education. And in a liberal arts education, the emphasis is not so much on memorizing information. It's about thinking. and reasoning and considering how those disciplines inform the world that we interact with. Secondly, you are part of a campus where your faith is a welcome part of conversation. And because faiths inform people's decisions, it's good when they are part of the conversation. And finally, you are part of a campus where professors are committed to students, truly committed to the welfare of the students, not simply to their own ideas. In a place where students are valued, where truth is validated, and you are encouraged to think, we can be part of the answer to the post-truth condition we are facing. The end.